let's start all over again. So this is Mom and Pop Comics Talk with Wendy Chin-Tanner and Tyler Chin-Tanner. We are your co-hosts, and we talk everything on this show from co-publishing comics to co-parenting. And tonight we have very special guests from the Embodied Anthology, which is our latest intersectional feminist comics poetry anthology, the first of its kind. And we have 4 amazing creators, 2 creative teams from that book, Liana Kangas, Diane Seuss, Kendra DeColo, and Ned Barnett. And let us quickly recap what we were talking about before we put on the audio. We're a little bit new at this still.
Yeah, sorry, second episode, but yeah, I'm working on the light too, so if you missed that, we'll have our light back on. Though this doesn't look bad.
Yeah, so that was a little bit of a
great. Yeah.
So should we quickly do that round robin of intros again? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm Liana Kangas. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them, whichever you prefer. I'm a comic artist full-time based in Memphis, and for those who I guess follow, I also run a podcast called Comics Inebriated, which is kind of like the drunk history of comics. But I've done creator-owned True Cult, but I've also worked with AWBW World a ton. I've worked for Vault, TKO, 2000 AD, Z2, a ton of really cool publishers, but I primarily do a lot of work with strong women characters and sci-fi and things like that. And yeah.
Great, thanks.
So I had the honor of working with, sort of working separately in secret with Liana. This is a new experience for me to have my work interacted with by a visual artist in this way. I'm a poet, and my fifth book came out this year in March, called Frank: Sonnets. And it's a sort of memoir in 130 or so sonnets. Yeah, I live in Michigan. I have a dog.
Fantastic.
Dog's the most important part.
Yeah.
I'm Kendra DeColo. I'm a poet living in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm in Provincetown right now, which is kind of my true home. It's where I grew up. And I just had a book come out called I'm Not Trying to Hide My Hungers from the World, which is about motherhood and sexuality and pop culture. And I had a previous book come out with Third Man Records called My Dinner with Ron Jeremy. So I also write about pornography, or was writing about pornography. We'll see, that might be another theme that comes up again. And I love collaborating, and this was a very new kind of collaboration where I didn't get to speak directly with the collaborator, but it was such a joyous experience and very cool to be part of this.
Hello, I'm Ned Barnett. My pronouns are he, him. I make comics about heroes, health, and history in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Primarily, my work is self-published. I've done some work with AWBW World, which has been really fun. My focus history-wise is the early 20th century, primarily First World War. And I do a lot of graphic medicine work as well, which looks at graphic medicine looks at medicine either from the practitioner or the patient's perspective, and how comics can make the experience easier, more understandable, and relaying information. This was an absolute joy for me to collaborate on Kendra's poem. I have done poetry interpretations in comics before, but primarily they've been of First World War poetry, so it was a real joy to be doing it with someone who's alive. And I can talk to you afterwards.
That connection.
Yes. Yeah. We missed, without the audio, we missed a couple of connections as 2 Tennessee residents discovered that they were.
Yeah, it was kind of nice. We got a quick run through.
Yeah.
Like low-key meet everybody.
Uh-huh.
And are you in Provincetown, Massachusetts?
Yeah.
or-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Massachusetts.
It's
Oh,
so
okay.
nice. It's way colder than Nashville right now, but it's so nice.
Mm.
Oh, I'm in shorts and a t-shirt in Cambridge. So.
Oh yeah, this is your warm weather.
Mhm.
Yeah. This is my summer, is my ideal summer.
I'm dressed thematically for both your stories because, well, I don't have a pussy hat, but I did wear a pink pussy bow, and also I have tits. So, you know,
It plus poems.
yes.
It's darn out
And I tried to color coordinate with the drink in the class, which is
Yeah.
from Comics
Obsessed.
Inebriated, which
Obsessed.
I love that
Which is
podcast.
Liana's baby, yeah.
Mhm.
Really dig
Mhm.
that.
So we're
And-
on
Makes
theme
me
with
so
our
happy.
dressing.
Yeah. You know, and I want to come on just as an excuse to drink. So I don't.
Yeah.
Do-
Oh, it's happening.
All
Already.
right.
It's absolutely.
I don't even have a topic. Just I'm
It's
just gonna
so
come
fun.
on and drink and talk randomly about comics and stuff, and that'll be great. So, but that's not. Oh no, someone.
No, we're good.
We're good. Okay.
Yeah, we froze for a minute, but we're fine.
But this conversation is very serious. We got poetry and art and stuff. So you know, let's clean it up a little. I don't know, to start off with. I mean, you talked about how you hadn't met each other yet, and we kept you at arm's length. That actually wasn't. I think we kind of left it like we could have connected them if they wanted to. But I think there was also something sort of positive about not having anybody have to fret too much. I think we did want to kind of take that pressure away. We weren't saying they couldn't connect, but I don't know, just that and just all the juggling that would have had to happen, you know, monitoring all those
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah, because we had 23 stories, so double that many creators all together, all of whom we had to coordinate. And we were also trying something really new. Rather than illustrating the poems, we wanted to create sequential art narratives from them. And so, you know, Tyler and I sat down for the most part, although sometimes we also collaborated with the artist and the poet, depending on the difficulty of the piece, I suppose, and depending on whether or not all parties were happy with what we came up with. But for the most part, Tyler and I would start out with a story, with a narrative that we felt connected to, was inspired by the poem, as opposed to just trying to show it visually in a straight way, if that makes sense. So I'm really curious to hear what all four of you felt about that process and how that was for you navigating something that's so experimental, that's so profoundly new.
I guess we'll go in the same order.
Sure,
Whoever-
whoever
wants
feels
to-
moved.
Pops up, yeah.
Cool. I thought it was very freeing to have been given a piece of poetry to adapt. And I think when you and I first talked about it, meaning Wendy, I was like curious about how the process would go, and you were just kind of like, that's essentially up to you, which is really cool to have like control as a storyteller, because seeing the piece that was given to me, I was like, clearly they know that Diane and I would get along off the bat. And two, I like the words that you called it edgy, and I was like, I am essentially the edgelord in comics that I know of. So I love that that it was given to me, because I felt like I sat on it for a really long time trying to think of how I would storytell, and beyond, I was like, what's better than personal experience? You know what I mean? So I thought it was really interesting, especially knowing that like Diane and I hadn't met or discussed it, or me asking like, the typical process of comics creating, where, you kind of go back to a writer and be like, is this kind of, sometimes I do, like, is this kind of what you had in mind, or do you have any notes or anything like that? So it was kind of cool. Anthology based, it's kind of typical, I guess, for teams to kind of do it in a quick fashion, but this was kind of interesting in the sense that, I don't know, went off without a hitch.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually worked
I had a
really
great
well
time.
throughout. And
No.
so yeah, no big fights or complications or anything. So
Just between us.
yeah.
Kidding.
Oh.
I was really interested in what you came up with and immediately saw that it was your personal inroad, I think, into my material. So in that sense, on the level of narrative and imagination, it was a collaboration, but it was
Absolutely.
done on the page.
Mhm.
And I I really wanted to ask you about that. Like, how are you seeing the narrative from your perspective? What did it allow you to tell through images?
There was one line that hit me, and I'll pull it up real quick.
I mean, this is a poem for those of you who haven't seen it yet that begins, you know what living means, tits out, tits in the rain.
Yeah.
And so, it's so sort of tits out that I wondered, tell me where that took you.
It's tits out, but it's also a sonnet, may we point out.
Yeah, it
So,
is. It's a sonnet.
Diane revolutionizes formal poetry. Let's just say that. Let's put that out there.
Thank you. Thanks.
I could tell, like almost immediately. I think I had looked you up, and I was like, "This is an academic," which is already a huge thing for me because, like, I worked in at a university for almost a decade, and so it's really cool to work with an artist like that as it was, and for something that felt very raw to me that I read. And then specifically, there was a line which I'm trying to find. I think it was a description leading to of the crone whose nightie won't be pulled up anymore.
Yeah.
And like, I think I had sort of envisioned, so like my family specifically, they're all very free going, and I wouldn't say we're particularly close in terms of like we're not the Brady Bunch, but we get together every holiday and everything. And I essentially was raised by my grandparents, but my mom was really hands on in terms of major parts of our lives and things like that. So I don't want to make it seem, I guess, like she wasn't a maternal figure. And so I had this very weird introspective look of what a maternal figure was in my life. Like mine is very much not like anybody else's that I grew up with. And so there were some lines that spoke to me in terms of like kind of how I saw my grandma being a mother to me versus how my mom was being a mother to me, and sort of how I was like a mom to myself and had to take care of my brother a lot of times. And so it's sort of evolved from that, being like, I see these three generational people. I was like, I guess I could use myself, especially to like memorialize, people who are, very, who took care of me my whole life, which I think it's like a celebration of embracing your body. And I thought that that was really powerful because growing up, I've had a lot of friends whose parents were really hard on them for their bodies and things like that. And I never issue. And in fact, and I'm really glad that I get to talk to you about it.
Yeah, really, really an amazing encounter you and this. It's the hope I have for anything I write, that less than it needs to less that you need to know about me than it spurs something so that you can tell about you and interact, sort of dance with the poem in that way. Two personal islands kind of connecting.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Mm.
I would say that that's probably even a 3-step process. It's like a very kind of meta interactive approach, I think, because, I chose that poem because it spoke to me as a woman who has nursed 2 children for a ridiculously long time. And, that poem had to be in the book. You know, from the batch that you sent me, that was just immediately the one that I personally resonated most with. So, you know, I think in some sense it's comics poetry is so deeply interactive in this kind of like super hot medium way in the Marshall McLuhan sense of hot media, you know.
Yeah, great. Well, should we move on to who wants to start out of you two, Ned and Kendra? Hear how your process
Kendra, how
went.
about you go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, especially because it's so interesting for me. So it took me a while to start writing after my daughter was born, and comics were kind of what my breakthrough was. I just happened to like go into this gift shop that had a zine section, and that was like the gateway to learning about these like badass mothers who were writing, you know, comics about their experience about postpartum depression, about childbirth, about pregnancy loss, and it gave me this kind of, so I started doing these crappy comics on my own before I started even writing poems again, and it gave me this distance from the material where I could have compassion for myself by actually drawing myself. And so when this project came up, I was like so thrilled because I've been wanting to connect with comic artists just from that initiation, and to see like what would it actually look like for a real comic artist to interpret this. And one question I had for you, Ned, is about finding the linear story in it, and also the emotional arc. And just for people who haven't read the poem, it's about a woman who's going through pregnancy loss, and there's a lot of evasion that happens in it before she can finally admit, before she can get into the real sorrow and grief at the end. And I just feel like you treated the comic with such tenderness, and also, but so many things surprised me about your choices, and I would love to hear how you
So this was actually a really interesting comic for me to do because I'm of a trans man. I have no desire to have children, and so it's really interesting to have been offered this poem about losing a child, and it's something that I will likely never experience. But the words were just that your words are just so beautiful, and when Tyler sent it to me, I was like, I need to draw this. It's beautiful. And so it was really fun to like, I took the germ of the idea that Wendy and Tyler had sent me with, like, this is what we sort of see happening as the narrative arc, and I was like, okay, this is great. I don't have to think about what the overarching arc is. I can pick out the words, and I can pick out the images that I really like, um, and I really like drawing plants, and I like drawing crystals, and so it's just like, this is great. I can just incorporate these things that I enjoy drawing and I like looking at, and into this. And I really like to take moments in comics and emotional moments and just be able to have the reader sit with them, and that's something that I really like to do in my work. And making you sit and look at something and really pause, and the pause is my favorite thing. And I find that making comics is a lot like writing poetry. I don't write poetry much anymore. In a former life, I ran a literary magazine, and so I was reading a fair bit of poetry, and one of my good friends is a poet and a translator, and we talk about poetry a lot. And it's one thing that has always sort of stuck with me is like the rhythm of poetry and the rhythm of panels, and how you select the words, and the placement when you have non-traditional poetry, when you're placing the word, like, how does that work in relationship to comics when you're placing things across the page? And yeah, so being able to have had a sort of germ of the idea meant that I could focus more on how am I going to do the placement, how am I going to add visual things to it without pulling away from the impact of the initial poem.
There was this other thing that really interested me that you did where, so in my head, the speaker is the one who can kind of claim witchcraft for her own, and it's everyone else who's commodifying it, and they're kind of the fake ones. But I feel like you flipped it so that the speaker in the comic is really, I don't know how I would describe her, but not edgy. And everyone who's interacting with is actually kind of owning witchcraft in a more genuine way. And I was really kind of surprised, but in a cool way, because I thought that brought up the evasiveness that the speaker is so disconnected from
Mhm.
her surroundings. I don't know. If that makes sense.
It was the line about the wearing the Hex the Patriarchy shirt,
Yeah.
and I was like, I need to have the women, I need to have the people in the doctor's office like having this, like wearing the shirts and stuff. So it was just it was one of those, like, the way when I sat down and started drawing, it just felt much more natural to have our speaker be uncertain and be hesitant and not really connecting to it yet. And
Cool.
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I felt also like
Yeah.
the journey of the poem as well as the art was a journey from dissociation to integration. And I
Mhm.
feel like you both did that beautifully.
Love that. And I just love the connection that you were saying that you do graphic medicine, because it really was comics about miscarriage and pregnancy when it allowed me to write that poem. And so I don't know, that connection is really beautiful to me.
Yeah, that's like when I read the poem and had like, oh, this is how I connect to this, because like I said, like, this is not something I have experienced and likely will experience, but this genre of making comics, like, this is where it fits in. And yeah, and I like to have a lot of tenderness to my subjects, and it was a fantastic poem to bring tenderness to, or you have, it's a very tender poem to pull tenderness from and bring into art as well as from the words. So
Great. Well, listening to you talk, it's like, well, we really picked the right artists, and I'm not sure how much of that was. We had a sense for sure, but it
Yeah.
really seems like we nailed it. So
I felt like there was definitely like a matching of people with similar aesthetic vibes, if that makes sense. And I think, you know, in these cases that really worked, you know, and that
Yeah.
was, it was a very intuitive thing.
yeah, but also you don't want to make assumptions. You know, you're kind of like, is this poem sound good? Like good?
Yeah.
Like you want to like feel it out a little bit. You know, especially the
Have
subject
you met all of
matters.
us
And
in person separately?
what's that?
Has Wendy known all of us separately prior to matching up? Ever? No. Okay.
No, not so actually. I I know all of the poets, and I know only some of the artists. So so
That's
that would be a
amazing.
no. Like this is the first time I'm meeting Ned.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, although you know I looked at your work, and that definitely you know helped with the matching. I looked at everyone's work before we decided.
There was a good
pair
assortment.
people.
I mean, you knew the poets at least online, right? For most, even if you hadn't met them in person.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like with the artists, there's a good assortment of people that we knew personally. You know, managed to meet at a convention. Some that I just knew more online, like Ned. We knew each other more just social media wise. And then it's just a few artists that we just sort of scouted out, looked at their work and things like that. So it was a good mix. We were just trying to find best we could predict the
But
match.
sometimes we also went with contrast too. You know, I think in your cases it was more of a matching, whereas in other cases in the book it was going with you know people who had profoundly different vibes to you know create that kind of drama. I think from the aesthetic difference.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and well, it's tough with comics because you get such huge styles, a range of styles and things, and just like to match that with a poem, because you can have more mainstream kind of ones and things like that. So yeah.
Right. I mean, we also had you know a huge range of poetic styles too.
Oh sure. Yeah.
Oh.
But there's some that
Liana,
more. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, I was interested that the images, I don't know, these aren't easy to see on here, but
no, we can see. That's great.
Yeah, and let's see, this last one. So they seem to be were they from photographs or sort of invented photographs?
So the one actual, I think it is an actual photograph that I drew, is a photograph. That's actually a photograph of my grandparents. Around
That's
the
what I
time that they
thought.
met. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then the panel below it is similar to a photograph that they took on their wedding.
Mhm.
The next page is, I think we have a home video of something similar. So one is, it's kind of like one memory that I have meshed from when we used to live in a place that was kind of near my grandparents. And then one is similar to a photograph that we have, but it's all essentially, so the beginning is supposed to mirror, I guess, sort of like pre me and then how I grew up or whatever to, it's essentially supposed to have a scope of my grandma. And she is mirrored on both the beginning and ending pages. And so I took a lot of inspiration from, like, I actually called her and talked to her for like 6 hours about like how my grandparents met and like what it was like. And, you know, my grandpa has since passed away pretty recently. So it's been like a huge change in our family dynamic. And I think that's why I had actually picked this, because it was actually around the time that this had happened. Which is more impactful. But it was kind of interesting because, you know, I'm not anywhere near home. So I had to kind of use what I had and from memory, and also like, you know, trying to remember and like ask my mom to take pictures of old photographs of my grandma. Kind of difficult, but it was kind of nice. Yeah.
And it is a different style slightly. I mean, not drastically, but Liana, usually, I don't know, the style, how much did you do to adjust your stylistic approach for this one? Because it did seem kind of different than what you typically do.
Yeah, Liana's style is typically more pop,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. This is actually a style that I wish that I could do and or would love to do in terms of like personal stuff that I would write and draw myself. And I knew that you both, you know, you guys would kind of let me do my thing. So this is like something that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. And I felt really comfortable with it because it was, you know, subjects that I knew, as opposed to like making new characters or anything like that. So
I found the painterly quality to be an interesting bridge to the fact that Diane's poem was a sonnet. You know, if that makes sense.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Say that again.
I was saying I found the painterly quality of Liana's images to be an interesting bridge to the fact that your poem is a sonnet.
Yes.
You know, so it's a callback to an older form of art.
What's cool is my grandma is actually an artist. She opened and ran their own art gallery for a long time, and she would do textiles and paint on pillows and things like that. And she's also, you know, like she painted the front sign of it and like random things like that. Just like an extremely creative person. So kind of goes with the looseness maybe. This is a lot more loose than what I usually do, for sure.
Yeah.
So.
And so I guess one thing I'm wondering is, what kind of reactions have you gotten from any, if you've heard from people who have seen, who are familiar with your work but are seeing it in this anthology? You know, whether it's a poem they're familiar with but are seeing it for the first time, or just seeing your artwork in a different light. Have you gotten any feedback or responses in that?
I think Ned and I have a similar friend group that like celebrated, you know, all of our stories. Like I know that when I broke it open, I immediately read all of like all of the people that I knew, which was really cool to see like the you know. But I'm actually mailing a copy to my mom, so I will try to ask my family to record, you know, the response, which would be pretty
cool. That would be so cool.
Yeah, I didn't tell them yet, so it'll be really fun to. I think they'll be really excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, reaction video.
Yeah, we want to see it. Post it or send it to us. We want to see what people think. What about for the poets? What was the reaction that you're like, my poem's going to be turned into a comic book? Was that positive, negative, question marks? What?
Like, what is
Oh,
that?
I mean, everybody's thought it was cool. How about you, Kendra?
Yeah, I think jealousy.
Yeah.
Nice.
Envy.
That's always a good feeling.
Yeah, that's what you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, just totally like this is such an amazing project. Why didn't we
Mhm.
have more of this? And just
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we will.
We can do
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, we
I know,
were.
like
Yeah, we
Ned's
were.
work I haven't seen colored very often, so to see
Yeah.
this type of coloring was so cool.
Oh,
For
yes.
me
Mhm.
personally, like I'm so used
I-
to
I-
Ned's black and white stuff. Yeah.
Mhm.
I have never had my work colored by someone else before.
Oh,
So this was a really cool, like, being able to see how Leslie handled it, and
Yeah.
how they use the very watercolory technique, which is a lot of how I was sort of picturing it when I was drawing it. Um, Interestingly, this was the last comic that I drew by hand, like drew traditionally and inked traditionally. I've switched to doing digital at this point, so it was a really cool, like, for me, having this poem that is not something it's not a subject matter I typically draw. I am very much I'm a war cartoonist, and doing and having it be like the last traditional one that I've done. I'm not saying I will never go back to traditionally draw comics, but drawing on my iPad is a lot quicker and easier, and I don't have to do as much math.
Yeah.
But it's so cool to see it colored,
Yeah.
and the choices in color, and makes me very happy.
Yeah, and shout out to Leslie Adlansky too, which we should have mentioned before we colored it. And she had done a story in Loved and Lost anthology that we did, and had a similar
Mhm.
effect. And I kind of got the feel of what kind of approach she thought might work, and we talked about that similar approach that she did for the final story in Loved and Lost on your work, and it turned out really nicely. So
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
shout out
I
to
love
Cardinal
it.
Ray too,
Oh,
the
yeah.
letterer,
Oh,
because I think
The
a lot of
lettering
folks
is just
yeah.
absolutely. I think a lot of folks who are unfamiliar with how comics are produced are unaware of how much of a team sport it is. Like it goes through
absolutely.
so many hands before it gets to the hands of the reader. And I think that, for a book like this, the sort of like MVPs are folks like the letterers and like the colorists, but the letterers in particular, I feel, did a phenomenal job in interpreting line breaks and stanzas and cadence, and just trying to find a synergy with the artwork, not competing with the artwork. I mean, that was a huge job, and just it was
It's a lot of
super new.
pressure. Yeah.
Yeah.
letters and colorists are amazing. That is
Yeah. I mean, the
an
whole
area that I do not I don't claim any expertise in. And when I letter my own work, I hand letter it, and leans into the like zine do-it-yourselfer sort of thing. So seeing someone like really beautifully letter my work is just a really cool, wonderful experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just underappreciated sometimes because people don't realize it. You don't realize it until you see some bad lettering done, and then you're like, "This is hard to read, and I don't know why." And lettering, they too much. They say like a letter should be invisible, which isn't quite it, but you shouldn't notice how easy it is to read. And it's more of something like that because they really bring you through the page and pace it. Much like the artwork does. It has to match that. So. Yeah, we were really happy with working with Cardinal and some of the others. So yeah, it turned out great.
Yeah, and everyone was learning on the fly in a sense because I don't think that they had ever lettered poetry before. So
Poems are weird. Let's face it.
yes.
And like
the line breaks. I was thinking that must have been really daunting.
But I think poems and comics have a lot in common though too, because both deal so much in silence, both deal so much in pacing, and the notion of guiding the eye across and down the page. And, you know, the conflict between lines is similar to the conflict between panels. You can even do like visual rhyming in a sense from panel
Yeah.
to panel. So, you know, I feel like there's a huge conversation to be had between comics and poetry.
Like my friend Vermina Yee, who's a really fabulous cartoonist, and when she writes about her theories of comics and making comics, she uses the language of poetry rather than language of film, which I find really great, and I like it a lot, including the rhymes and such. And when I was adapting Kendra's poem, I did make notes for the letter as to which lines I thought belonged in which panel, because I have done poetry comics before, and so that was something I was thinking about when I was adapting it. Was okay, this line I think goes best with this panel, goes back with this panel, goes back with this panel, but ultimately it was their call, and Cardinal did a great job. So.
Yeah, they really did. Okay. Well, so onto the idea of doing this again. Last episode we were tossing around some ideas, and somebody mentioned doing it backwards, like have the artist draw a story without any words, and then the poet would come in and write a poem to the artwork.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
I'm in on it if you want me. I think I'd feel very powerful.
Yeah.
Dan's like, I cannot be stopped.
I can do with it as I wish.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that would be interesting to show.
Ned, I was interested in what you were saying about that the rhythm of the panels and the rhythm of language have something in common. And I've never thought of it that way. So now my mind is blown.
Cool.
So poets, if it was reversed, we'd have to think about that.
Yes. Yes.
Kendra.
And are we including panels? And because that's one thing I love to do with my personal work is I don't include panels. They're much more, the panels are more implied than actually there, and where things move and the intersection between what is one panel and what is another, and are the words separate? How do things move? So it's
I was just about to say, like, you and I totally reversed on this entire project. Because,
we did.
Everything has a panel. It's a straight widescreen panel, or it's a normal panel, or whatever. So to do something totally flow, I think I can think of maybe one page that I somewhat didn't do a panel page or whatever. So to see you do, like, full panels was wild to me. Like, I almost had to, second look, second guess.
Is this Ned's
yeah. And I almost felt like when I turned it into Wendy and Tyler, I was like, are they going to think I'm a fraud? Because these pages look like, they look like splash pages, but I was intentional about, like, where I was thinking the poem would go, and, like, what I picked versus, on each page.
Yeah.
So.
No, we were super excited by the diversity. No, go for it, Ned.
I was just going to say, it's like Liana and I unintentionally banged heads and swapped each other's perspective.
Often, right?
Yeah, we do. Swapped each other's techniques.
What was interesting too was that it was actually super intuitive and super easy for us to find the narrative arcs through the book, to sequence the stories. It was surprisingly easy, because there were so many sort of like visual as well as linguistic or narrative cues that gave us the sequence. It was wild. It was, I don't think I've ever experienced that before in putting together an anthology with you. This is our 7th anthology, and I think this was the easiest one to sequence.
I think it was, we just was like, let's start with this one, and we just thought, which one's next, and which one's next, and we got to the end, and then we never changed it.
Yeah, it was just super intuitive somehow. You know, it was like one thing led to the next, in this very obvious way, you know.
Mhm.
Art form at its best.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
So,
Can I ask a question to Kendra and Diane?
Yeah, of course.
When you were thinking about what to submit and knowing like the context of the book and everything like that, obviously things can get a little bit personal. Were you prepared to just like let go and just like vomit on the page and be like, let it be, and this is everything about me, here you go? Because like even before I did the pages, I flopped and had anxiety whether or not I wanted to do something personal. So I guess, how much of your personal experience did you put into it, and were you expecting to have to like talk about it or anything like that?
You can go first, Kendra.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good question and something I've thought a lot about. So, it's a very personal poem. It's one that I didn't write it specifically for the anthology, but when Wendy put out the call, it was one of the first poems I thought about submitting. But this is the only poem about pregnancy loss that I have published right now. I haven't really submitted any others because it's so personal. It's something I haven't really talked about publicly before, but it's something that's really important to me, that there are narratives out there. Like when I was in the doctor's waiting room, when I was going through it, I checked on Instagram, and this amazing comic artist, Julia Wirtz, do you know her? She just
I love her.
Yeah, she's so great. In that instant, she posted a comic about her pregnancy loss, and like it was just incredible synchronicity. So I've been feeling that connection all along the way with working through the subject matter. But it was something really freeing about letting. I felt really scared when Wendy chose that poem, because I sent other poems like about like breastfeeding or about like sex and periods. So I'd love to see a period sex poem illustrated too. That'd be awesome. But when you told me this was the one, I was hesitant. I was like, oh my god, like this is something that's so raw. Am I really willing to let it go? And it really was part of kind of this healing process. So
I'm really glad to hear that. I mean, it spoke to me because I have experienced 3 pregnancy losses, and I write about it. And anyone will tell you there's a whole bunch of poems about pregnancy loss. So I gravitated immediately to that as something that really needs to be out there.
Yes, 100%. Your work was kind of a touchstone for me too, and just
Thank you.
And it feels like it's something that's still so taboo, or not taboo to talk about, but it just isn't, because for so many reasons.
Yeah.
But I've been saved by people who talk about it, so I'm like, I should put my story out there too. And
I think it's been barred. Yeah, I think it's been barred from being a subject of serious literary inquiry.
Yeah.
And
for some reason, I wonder why that is.
Yeah. So let's do some serious literary inquiry about it. That's what we're doing here. Yeah.
I know I'm the oldest person here, and I've been writing a long time. And Frank, my book of sonnets, it's the story of my life in certain ways. So all my books have been very personal. And I think I've just gotten to the point where I don't hold anything back, and I don't have any trepidation. I don't write things that could potentially damage others, but I don't have any shame or pride left. So my biggest, I think the thing that I can give is my honesty, as you're saying, Kendra, and and also, I think this is true for anybody who does an art. There's something very stabilizing about having this thing you're working on. You're not spilling the beans on Dr. Phil, right? You're, although I do that too, but yeah, you have this thing, and it's a sonnet, or it's a drawing, or it's a panel, and it's it's an object out there. And I think that in itself, it kind of, it takes really hot material and cools it down and gives you that distance. It becomes an aesthetic project rather than this thing you carry around in your body, you know. So I'm pretty comfortable writing about anything, and yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that speaks to the second wave feminist tenet that the personal is political.
yeah,
Yeah.
And I was a therapist, so that's one reason I'm interested in the medical. What is it again? Graphic
medicine.
Graphic medicine. I'm gonna forget that phrase.
I'll email you afterwards.
Will you? Okay.
Yeah, I will.
Thank you. And you know, it's just the terrain I think most of us live in. And luckily, I didn't have a mother who. My father died when he was young, and I didn't have a mother who told me what I should or shouldn't talk about. So, yeah. I hope you do more of that stuff, Liana.
You
know,
this was honestly like therapy to me. I don't know why. Talking about my family is very difficult, and so to draw them, which is why I'm like, my brother needs to go over there and record what's gonna happen, you know, because yeah, I love them. I would not be the person I'm today without them, and especially to have that sort of freedom to experience and like figure out who you are without limitations or boundaries is such a, I mean, that is a privilege that not a lot of people have. So this, I feel like they had similar experiences maybe, and so to have that passed down to me and like hopefully to inspire other people to give that to, I guess, maybe their generations going forward or something. I don't know. I'm getting real deep in this.
No, that's what we're here for.
I was just gonna add in like there's one thing that I actually find about with making comics and with doing, because I do a lot of memoir and autobiographical stuff, is being able to make these comics and interpret and experience and own things that happen, like things that may be outside of your control, being able to own it. And that's one thing, like my mental health comic started as a way for me to understand what was going on when I was having a really severe issue with depression and generalized anxiety disorder, and being able to make these comics and look at them and go, ah, yes, this is how I experience it, and then give them to my therapist or give them to my husband and be able to go, this is what I feel like. And with the visual element, being able to have them go, oh, I understand. And similar with poetry, getting that really raw, visceral moment and going, oh, I understand what you're going through, and I connect with this, and like I feel this, and this hurts, even though I'm not the one who is going through it initially. And yeah, I'm a big fan of autobio comics, and then you can decide if you want to share them or not. And autobio poetry, and it's, you can own your experiences and own what's happened to you and make decisions, and maybe you can explore what may have happened if you had made a different decision, and then come back to own it. So it's, yeah, big fan. Autobio comics. Stick figures, can't go wrong.
So much.
I want to see some. I'm gonna look both of you up and learn more.
I literally already wrote down Frank and a dinner with Ron Jeremy to buy after this.
Nice.
It's so special being here with you all, with Diane, who I feel like your work kind of was such a gateway for me to write autobiographically, and especially with humor and using humor as a device, which I just like worship the way you do it.
Thank you.
And I'm just thinking, as you guys were talking, it occurred to me the part of the healing process in this was having someone affirm like this story is worth being told.
Mm.
Yes.
You know, Wendy, you talked about it. You know, this is so many women's story, or so many, not just women, but like so many stories are kind of prevented. Oh, is that someone else?
No, that's me.
Oh,
Sorry.
it's 8 o'clock.
Or aren't deemed worthy, or this isn't literary. And then I think there was something with pregnancy loss that very much felt that way to me. And then someone interpret it, this was like, okay, not just in terms of whether I can tell the story, but just my grief. I think for a long time I felt I didn't have the right to feel the grief I felt. And so seeing it illustrated, it's like, wow.
I mean, it's a whole, you know, half of the world that hasn't been told until the last, 30 years or listened to anyway.
Right.
You know, like the Muriel Rukeyser line, if one woman told the truth about the world, about her
their
life, the world would split open. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that, and what you're telling, Ned, about your experience, your embodiment. I just think it's so crucial. And, you know, these are the, it used to be that, you know, poetry was seen as legitimate if it somehow had to do with public life or history or religion. And those are cool, those are important. But you know, even men's emotional experiences were sort of seen as having public worth, and everybody else was sort of kept in the shadows. So let's all do it.
Yeah.
You know?
I think you can create a form of transference in art when you simultaneously reach into the details and the specificity of the personal while also reaching for the universal. And that way you can create this conversation with the reader. You know, I think, you know, I know that for myself, but I think in general, people write and create art in order to feel less alone. We also read and consume art in order to feel less alone. So it's about meeting there in the middle, and it's about sharing those experiences and identifying with those experiences. So y'all did an amazing job in balancing the specific and the universal, the personal and the universal.
I think it'd be really cool if we did do the art and then poetry after too.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, what an exercise.
So fun.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think, you know, we have to keep this going somehow. It's got to be something, you know. So that, and you know, we'll see. And just hearing you talk about it makes me realize, you know, makes me feel good that we put something like this out and it meant something to the creators and hopefully to readers as well too. So yeah, we'll keep it going. And
it meant something to us too.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
actually, the fact that we were able to make this thing together during such a horrible, scary time in the world was very meaningful for us, very grounding, and it was also very intimate, you know, for us as a couple to do that together. So thank you for, you know, being a part of that experience for our family, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you for including us in that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And thank you for joining us on this. Really appreciate you making the time to come chat with us. This is great. It went by so fast.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. We're like, oh, maybe we'll make an hour, and here we are, 8 o'clock. I know we messed up at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much
for another 3 hours.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your patience with our, you know, technical difficulties, everyone here and everyone listening or watching.
I just need to hire a moderator or something. That's all. I'm not always like the sound. And
We should just get Maddie to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
14-year-old. So,
Oh.
Liana knows Maddie.
A 14-year-old would have it, man.
Yeah.
Actually, Maddie, we're thinking about having Maddie do a show next week. Maddie and I will get on there. I think it would be great. And we'll intersperse the mom and the pop with the daughter and pop type thing.
Yeah, so what are we calling it? With
the
Maddie Moo and her dad too? Like, something like that. What were you?
Yeah, something like that. Or Pops too or something. I don't know if we want to redo the pop thing or whatever.
Is she still cool with being called Moo?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. That came from her obsession with Scooby-Doo when she was like 3, 4, and it's persisted.
Yeah. So she loved it. All right, awesome. Let us do a quick sign out. So we'll switch the screens. If you guys want to hang around, we'll just do a quick, goodbye after we're live. But yeah, we'll switch screens, and you're gonna do the sign out.
No, I did the intro. You do
Oh,
the
I'll do
sign
the sign
out.
out. All right, all right. There we go. That's my. All right, back to us. Thanks for joining us, everyone. For coming back for the embodied, or the second of our discussions. We'll be back in 2 weeks. You may have heard. Maybe we'll have something next week if we can convince our daughter to do a show with me.
We can bribe her into it.
Yeah,
she's bribable.
But we'll definitely be back in 2 weeks for another mom and pop comic talk with a new topic, which hasn't been announced yet, but we're really excited. Something you'll be familiar with. We'll have some good creators on there and a good conversation. So look for that soon. And in the meantime, take care out there.
Comics.
Read some comics.
Brush your teeth.
Yeah, exactly. Do your homework. Whatever it is you need to do, go and do that. And we'll see you next time.